Ms. Norman. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Martins.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
In opening, the legal team wishes to present evidence that relates to the landing of a chartered Jet Airways aircraft at the Waterkloof Air Force Base on the 30th of April 2013. We will examine the processes that were followed and those that were not followed. The incident falls within the ambit of term of reference 1.6. The main witness, or who does implicate by way of the report that she has put up to a statement that makes reference to various persons, is Ms. Nonkululeko Sindane, who will testify tomorrow. As a result of that report and her statement, Rule 33 notices were issued between the period the 20th and the up to the 25th of June. In respect of some of the implicated persons, we are shy of 1 day to the 14 days, and in respect of it's just 7 days. Maybe I need to explain the last one that was sent on the 25th of June 2019 to the former president. The only reason that it was sent, is mentioned in paragraph 2.1.15. And after much deliberations, the legal team, as a precaution, decided that maybe we should send out a notice. So we'll only have 7 days up to Ms. Sindane's when she testifies tomorrow. Maybe, Mr. Chairman, just to highlight what we've placed before you this morning, the chairperson will have Exhibit FF1 that will contain Ms. Sindane's statement together with the JCPS cluster report. That will be Exhibit FF1.
I'm sorry, you said I should have what?
Exhibit FF1.
FF8 and FF3 and FF6.
Those are the ones we're going to refer to in evidence, but I think in the box, yes, I just wanted to highlight what we've placed, everything that you will have in respect of this for now.
Yes. What else should there be?
FF1, that will be Ms. Sindane's statement and the JCPS report. And then the chairperson will also have FF2A and 2B.
Okay, FF2A and
2B.
I can see. FF1 I don't see, but
yes,
deal with that later.
Those
FF.
Yes, maybe I should just mention
F8. 5, 6,
yes,
7, 8, and I see I've got FF3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to highlight that FA2A and 2B, the records that were received from the public protector, and FF3, this is the disciplinary inquiry of Ambassador Kolwane. FF4, that will be the Board of Inquiry from the South African National Defence Force. FF5, it's reference to emails bundle. And then FF6, that is the exhibit that we are going to deal with this morning, which has this witness's statement, Mr. Benedict Martins. And then FF7, it's an attorney, Johannes Albertus Grizzle, will deal with his evidence much later in the week. And then FF8 is an additional bundles documentation. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I just wish to highlight that there has been responses from two of the implicated persons. One, Ambassador Kolwane, he will be arriving in the country tonight, and he has asked for more time, but we did indicate to him that he must bring that application before you tomorrow morning. And we have been in touch with his legal representatives, so there will be an appearance from them tomorrow morning. Ambassador Machila, on the other hand, there was a slight error in respect of his notice, because his notice referred to William Machila, and yet his name is Jeffrey Machila, and it also referred to his title incorrectly. So whilst we're trying to resolve those issues, then he, in the end, ultimately requested that he too be given some more time. And with him, we had, in any event, had not plotted him for this week, but he has agreed that he will appear before you, Mr. Chairman, on the 8th, which is next week, Monday. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to present the witness, Mr. Benedict Martins. May he be sworn in. Thank you.
Yes, please swear him in or administer the affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Benedict Anthony Duke Martins.
Do you have any objection with taking the prescribed oath?
I do not have an objection.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Martin's statement appears in Exhibit FF 6.2. That
Ms. Norman, I don't know whether it's because the mic is far from you, but you're not as audible as you normally are.
yes,
today.
I have flu, Mr. Chairman. I think
Oh,
yes,
maybe that's the
reason. But I'll try and put it
Yes.
closer slightly. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It appears 6.2. Thank you. Mr. Martins, before we start with your evidence, you indicated to me that you would like to make 2 corrections.
That's correct.
Yes. Could you please highlight to the chairperson where those are?
The corrections are on page 6.
Could you make reference to the top numbered page, the numbering on top? Because that's the paginated one.
Well, maybe let's start first by entering this
Just him
file.
identifying it. All right.
The file containing Mr. Benedict Martin's statement will be marked with his FFS, FS6.
6.2. Thank you. Oh, Exhibit 6. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
WF6.
2.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe.
When reference is made to pages, then the transcript will reflect that that's a reference to a page in that
6.
file.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe before we do that, Mr. Martins, could you please turn to Exhibit FF6 and turn to Exhibit FF6.2, where your statement is contained on top there of the page numbered 3. It will be TN-BM-WM-03. Do you see that?
Yes.
That is the number that we must, for the purpose of the record, we must maintain. We refer
Okay.
to according to those numbers. Now, is that your statement? Do you identify it as your statement?
I'm referring to my statement, ma'am.
Yes. If you turn to page 909 on top of the same exhibit FF62,
Yes,
is that your signature that appears on that page?
it is.
Yes. And you deposed to that on the 26th of June 2019, is that correct?
That's correct.
Statement. And are the contents of this statement true and correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. And then you had just one typographical error that you wanted to make, and that would be at page 08, TNBMWM08. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. What is the correction?
With regard to paragraph 19.3, the second line reads Lenasia.
Yes.
It should be Lensiria.
And so,
Oh, thank you.
And on the third line, the first word reads runaway. It should be runway.
runway. Yes.
And then the word Lenasia should be also replaced by Lensiria.
Yes. Thank you.
Lenasia appears in 19.3, but does it also appear elsewhere or only there? The one that should be replaced by Lenseria.
Lenseria.
Is it appearing only in 19.3, where we should make a correction?
That's my understanding from my reading.
okay.
I've
No,
only
that's fine.
noticed it on that particular page.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We move for those corrections as asked for by the witness. Thank you.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
you remember we said supplementary
Supplementary
statements will have to be made.
Yes.
When he gives his evidence, he will talk about Lenseria instead of Lenasia.
That's correct.
But a supplementary affidavit will need to be
To be
done
made. Thank
to
you.
make those, to effect those corrections.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Martins, I think you have picked up another error.
Yes,
another-
I have picked up some other errors rather. On page TN rather,
Yes.
BMW M05.
Yes.
Okay, I think, Ms. Norman, you have confused Mr. Martins by
reading the TN.
by reading the letters when you refer to the page. Mr.
Okay.
Martins, it will be enough if you just say page
Page
8,
nine.
page 9.
Okay.
Even
Yes.
Thank you,
ignoring
Judge.
the letters and
Yeah.
the zero, then we will know.
Yes,
but
thank you.
she is the one who caused the problem. Yes, what page?
Thank you.
Page 5, the first line, point 6. There should be capital letters, South African Aviation Authority. Aviation, capital A, Authority, capital A.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
And then with regard to paragraph 7, the second line, the same mistake has occurred there. Airports, company, airports should be capital A, company, capital C.
Yes.
And the next phrase of that sentence, the air traffic navigation services. Air should also be capital A, traffic, capital T, navigation, capital N, services, capital S.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last two words of that particular paragraph, regulation committees, capital R, capital C.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that all?
That's all.
Thank you. Apart from those, you are happy with the statement?
Yes, I am.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Martins, could you just briefly tell the chairperson about your educational qualifications, please?
I hold a BA degree from the University of UNISA, and I hold a LLB degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. At the time I obtained the degree, it was the University of Natal. And I also hold a master's in international law from the University of Cape Town. And I also hold a postgraduate degree in management law and economics from the University of Cape Town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martins, you understand your appearance today relates to the invitation that was made to you by the investigators and the list of questions that you were furnished with dealing with what is known as the Waterkloof incident.
I do.
Yes. Could you just tell the chairperson what was your position during April, May of 2013 within the government?
During that period, I was the Minister of Transport.
And when were you appointed as the Minister of Transport?
I was appointed as the Minister of Transport on the 11th June 2012 and held that position until the 9th June 2013.
Yes. And what were your responsibilities as the Minister of Transport?
During May 2013, I carried out my responsibilities of overseeing the Department of Transport. Those were inter alia, the responsibility for national and international airports, national roads, railways, and marine transport, the responsibility for the effective implementation of transport legislation, policies, and programs that are aimed at improving the lives of South Africans and to stimulate social and economic development. The Department of Transport also has a further mandate to oversee the implementation of projects by the entities under its remit.
Yes.
And those are 12 entities.
Yes, and now let's talk about the role of the Department of Transport insofar as aircrafts wishing, or even the local aircrafts landing at our various airports. What is the role of transport?
In regard to the question that you posed, ma'am, the National Aviation Security Program deals with matters of civil aviation, security, and with liaison with government departments concerning matters of civil security, civil aviation security. One of the key components of aviation security is a National Aviation Security Program. The Civil Aviation Act and associated regulation, together with this program, established the basic legal authority for the implementation of civil aviation security policies, practices, and procedures. The South African Aviation Authority bears responsibility for the safety and security of airports in terms of legislation and international conventions on safety and security. Sharing this responsibility are the Civil Aviation Authorities of South Africa, namely the Airports Company of South Africa, the Air Traffic Navigation Services, and the regulation committees.
Yes.
The Minister of Transport makes decisions and approvals on aviation in consultation with the relevant agencies that a particular matter requires.
Yes, let's just deal with that. You've mentioned in paragraph 7, AXA and ATNS. I'm just giving acronyms to those. Do those agencies report to the Minister of Transport?
Those agencies fall under the Department of Transport.
And when you talk about decisions that you, as a minister, would have to make, give approvals on aviations, what sort of, can you just give us examples? What sort of matters would require your approval?
The agencies concerned have got the day-to-day responsibility for carrying out their brief under relevant regulations and laws. But where they require the assistance, guidance of the minister, they would consult the minister and say, in regard to this particular matter, here's this international convention that we have signed. And when international conventions are signed, they have to be processed and ratified in Parliament. So that's an example of where there would be liaison and consultation in regard to a matter.
Yes. Now, coming back then to the issue, the waterkloof landing, when for the first time did you become aware that the Gupta family wished to have their aircraft land at Waterkloof Air Force Base?
No one approached me on the Waterkloof landing issue.
No, I see you reading from, yes, please don't read. I will direct you to the relevant paragraphs. But the answer that I would like you to, and the question I put to you is, when for the first time did you become aware that the Gupta family wished to have their aircraft land at Waterkloof?
The first time I was aware in regard to the Waterkloof landing was when an official of the Air Traffic Navigation Services called me to say that the plane had entered South African airspace without a requisite permit. But in regard to the landing of the Gupta plane at Waterkloof Air Base, I read it in the newspapers. I was not formally informed.
Yes. And then who is this official that, that informed you about the landing of that aircraft from ATNS?
I do not recall the name of the official, but from my engagement, the telephone call that I had, I assumed that it was a black person that called me.
Yes. And then, other than that occasion, did you have occasion to deal with any member of the Gupta family around the aircraft itself, whether it was about the landing of the aircraft or any other matter that related to the aircraft itself?
In regard to the aircraft, I've got it in my statement here.
Yes.
I think sometime in February, an approach was made by a member or members of the Gupta family to the Airports Company of South Africa in regard to seeking permission to land at OR Tambo International Airport. As a result of that, the acting CEO of EXA, Mr. Bongani Maseko, contacted me
Yes.
and informed me about this. My discussion with him was that the permission request that they sought was upon the aircraft landing at OR Tambo Airport. When the guests disembarked from the plane, there should be a reception, a welcoming reception. And Mr. Maseko explained to me that in the first instance, where the plane lands on the tarmac side, that's the jurisdiction of the Department of Home Affairs, and that it would be unlikely for anybody to give permission for an aircraft to land there and for a welcoming reception to take place there. So that was the first time that I learned about this. Then I attended a meeting, which is referred to in my statement,
Yes.
at OR Tambo Airport, where Mr. Gupta was present, Mr. Tony Gupta was present, and Mr. Ambassador Hlongwane, not Hlongwane, Kolwane.
Kolwane, yes.
Ambassador Kolwane was present, and Mr. Maseko and myself.
Yes.
And at that meeting, we
Sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Martins. Just before you get to the meeting, I just want to understand the clear request, the request that was made at the point when Mr. Maseko informed you. What was it that the Gupta family actually requested?
They requested that the plane, upon landing at OR Tambo, that they should be given permission to have this reception, this welcoming reception.
They wanted to have it where? Where was this reception going to be held?
As I said earlier,
Yes.
upon the guests disembarking from the airport, from the aeroplane rather,
Yes.
they wanted the reception to take place there.
On the tarmac.
On the tarmac.
Yes.
That was my understanding.
All right. Then you had a meeting. You say it was at, you held a meeting with Mr. Maseko. And where was this meeting held?
The meeting was held at OR Tambo Airport at the, if I recall, there's a hotel when you just walk across the road from the airport.
Yes.
I think it's the International
Hotel.
Intercontinental.
Hotel.
Yes.
The meeting took place, that's where the meeting took place.
Yes. So I'm sorry, when I interrupted you, you were mentioning the persons that were at that meeting. Who were they?
It was Mr. Tony Gupta.
Yes.
It was Ambassador Kolwane. It was the acting CEO of EXA, Mr. Bongani Maseko, and myself.
Yes. Yes. What transpired at the meeting?
At the meeting, the request was made for this welcoming ceremony.
Yes.
And at the meeting, I explained that on the tarmac side was the jurisdiction of Home Affairs, and that in my understanding, OR Tambo Airport being such a busy airport, it would not be possible and it would not be feasible to have a welcoming ceremony. And I even mentioned that I was not aware of anybody else having had such an opportunity. Normally ministers, when they get out of the plane, even they are just escorted immediately from where they disembarked by cars to wherever they are going.
Yes. And then what was then your decision at that meeting?
The decision was that we could not grant that permission.
Yes.
First and foremost, technically, I did not have the authority to do so, because on the plane landing site, on the tarmac site, the authority governing there is the Department of Home Affairs, where they have to stamp passports and process individuals arriving into the country.
Yes. And then after you told them, what was Mr. Tony Gupta's reaction?
His reaction was that, are you really denying the guests of the president and the friends of the president the opportunity to have this welcoming ceremony there?
Yes.
And we said that irrespective of whose guests or friends it is, permission cannot be granted.
Yes. And then is that how you parted?
Yes, that's how we parted.
Yes.
What was your understanding of who he was referring to as the friends of the president?
Judge, in his motivation that's covered in one of the paragraphs in my statement, which was also covered in the JCPSS report, Mr. Gupta, in motivating, was giving the impression that 4 or 5 ministers from India would be arriving in that plane. And some of those ministers and people in the plane were friends of President Jacob Zuma.
Oh, okay, thank you. And that was your understanding at that meeting?
Yes, at that meeting, that was the understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then you were asked by the investigators, with something that you have also put in your statement at page 5, if anyone approached you on the watercloak issue and your response to the request and the full reasons for those, and give furnished full reasons. I think that's what is meant in there. And then your response was that no one approached you on the watercloak issue.
That is correct. No one approached me in regard to the watercloak issue.
Now, could you just tell then the chairperson that then you had met with him and you told him that this cannot be done, that is the ceremony on the tarmac as they land. When else did you have this conversation, either with Mr. Gupta himself, Tony Gupta himself, or with either Mr. Maseko or any other person?
As you'd see from the statement,
Yes.
After the engagement at OR Tambo Airport, there were phone calls from him where he was asking if this really could not be accommodated. And then from myself, I told him that the decision taken at the airport stood. And then subsequent to that, in his engagement with Mr. Maseko, this is where Mr. Maseko advised that it might be possible for them to seek permission to land at Pilanesberg and at Lanseria Airport.
Yes. When you say him, who is that him?
I'm saying that it was Tony Gupta that was pursuing this matter.
Yes.
So this is the advice that he got from Mr. Maseko.
Yes.
So at this meeting at the airport, the whole request wasn't about the aircraft landing at OR, because that's normal.
Standard.
It was about holding this reception ceremony that they wanted on the tarmac. That is what the request was directed at.
That is correct, Judge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then, were you meeting Mr. Tony Gupta for the first time?
Maybe, sorry, Ms. Norman, did you ever get to understand why it was so important that the guests who arrived would have to be given a reception on the tarmac as they disembarked from the plane, as opposed to being received inside the airport building or after coming out of or even after coming out of the airport's building?
I surmise that the intention to have the welcoming reception on the tarmac would project the importance of the visitors arriving and the power and influence of the individuals receiving them.
Receiving them.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Maybe you could just tell us whether, in your experience, when visitors, let's say ministers, when they arrive, you've already said that they get escorted from the tarmac, and have you ever heard of an incident where there would be some form of celebration on the tarmac?
As I said earlier, I've never ever heard of such.
Thank you. And then before this meeting at OR Tambo, where Mr. Tony Gupta was present, had you met with him before, or were you meeting him for the first time at that meeting?
No, it was not the first time that I met Mr. Tony Gupta there.
Yes.
I remember having several interactions with members of the Gupta family.
Yes.
And I can articulate some of them.
Yes, could you please do that? Yes.
During 2011, when I was the Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises, I interacted with Mr. Atul and Tony Gupta at the SABC TNA business breakfast, which was arranged by the Department of Public Enterprises. Again, shortly after my 11th June 2012 appointment as the Minister of Transport, I had several phone calls from Mr. Tony Gupta, who averred that the PRASA tender process to acquire locomotives had not been open and transparent, and that he reserved his right to challenge the process, to challenge PRASA, and to challenge the Department of Transport in court.
What was that all about? Had he tendered for that tender? What was that all about?
I had just been shortly appointed to the minister as a Minister of Transport.
Yes.
And then a couple of days thereafter was when he called to question the tender process. My understanding was that he had tendered, or he wanted to tender at a late stage. And my explanation to him was that after having arrived at the department, I had several briefings from the 12 entities that report to the Department of Transport. And my understanding from the briefings that I'd received from PRASA, when mention was made about this particular tender, my understanding was that the tender had run its course, or by the time I was appointed, it was about to run its course to finality. So I explained this to Mr. Gupta, but he was insisting that in his understanding, there were irregularities in the manner in which the tender process had unfolded.
Yes.
So my response to him was that I had only recently been appointed as the Minister of Transport, and I was not aware of all the facts concerning the matter, that my limited understanding of the matter was that the tender process had run its course, or that it was about to end. My response to him further was that he was within his right to take whatever legal action that he felt necessary. I, however, suggested that it might be advisable for him first to seek clarity and obtain answers to the questions that he posed from the CEO of PRASA, Mr. Lucky Montana, who would be able to explain the details of the tender process before he, Mr. Tony Gupta, takes the matter to court. It was as a result of seeking to mediate this matter that I organized a meeting between Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Lucky Montana. I saw nothing untoward in arranging this meeting, as its aim was to clarify and give answers to the questions that Mr. Gupta had posed. I did not at any stage ask Mr. Montana to unduly, irregularly, or illegally to assist Mr. Gupta. There was no unlawful and or malicious intent on my part in facilitating the meeting. I think it is important, ma'am, to bear in mind that and to remember that at the time the meeting occurred in 2012, the benefit of hindsight that we have today did not exist. The context and the public image of members of the Gupta family was not what it is today in 2019, namely a family perceived and projected as the personification of corruption incarnate. In 2012, the Gupta brothers were not persona non grata, as they are projected to be today. All I knew then was that they were an Indian family originally from India who owned a medium-sized BEE company of moderate means named Sahara.
Yes.
An important point to note further is that the meeting that I facilitated did not result in Mr. Gupta obtaining the locomotives tender. Mr. T. Gupta was advised that the tender process could not be reversed. Mr. Gupta indicated that he would consider his option of taking the tender process on review. That brought the discussion and meeting to an end that I had with him and Mr. Montana.
Okay. Sorry, let's just go back to that facilitation of that meeting. When he first approached you about this tender, from your evidence, he had not tendered. Had he tendered at that point?
My understanding at that point was he had not tendered and he wanted to tender.
Yes.
And my response to him was that this process had run its course. So there's no way that you can tender at this late stage.
Yes. And then I'm just trying to understand then why would there be a need then to facilitate a meeting?
No, as I explained earlier on, he was asking questions in regard to how the tender was run, where it was advertised, what was not done. And I said to him that after having been a few days in this post, I can't answer those questions. The person that was relevant in the tender process would be able to give you answers to that would be Mr. Lucky Montana. And the issue that he had also raised was that he was going to take the tender process on review and he was going to take PRASA and the department to court. In order to obviate that, I thought that it would be easier for him to have a direct interaction with somebody who had intimate knowledge of the tender process where he could pose these questions.
Yes. Let's just talk about that, because he would have known that you were not involved in the tendering process as a minister.
Yes.
Because you had just been appointed as a minister to that portfolio when he approached you.
Yes, I'm sure he would have known that.
Yes, yes. I'm just trying...
Mr.
Yes.
Mendy, how long he had been in the department wouldn't affect whether or not he is involved in tenders, isn't it?
No, yeah, true.
It's
true. Yes.
the mere occupation of the ministerial position that should take him out of issues of tender.
That's correct, yes.
Yes.
Let's just deal with that then. Because you are the minister, you are not involved in any tendering process. I'm just trying to understand, and this person has not tendered at all. No, he has not submitted a tender. By calling then Mr. Lucky Montana, who would have been involved in that process, would he be, if Mr. Montana were to feel, I don't know how he feels about, or he felt about it, would it be wrong for him to feel that the minister wanted me to have a relook at this thing? Because now the minister is here, this person who's complaining is here, and yet he has not tendered.
No, I don't think that you would have felt that there was a need to relook at the tender. In tender processes, there are always losers, and people would find something to register as having been abnormal in regard to a tender so that they take their chances.
Yes. No, I'm just trying to understand the logic in you facilitating the meeting. Please excuse me if I appear not to understand what you're saying. But my understanding is that you had been appointed as a minister, you were not involved, and you shouldn't be involved in the tender processes. And somebody complains, a person who has not tendered, by the way, he comes to you and he says, he complains, and you say, okay, he threatens litigation. And then you say, okay, let's obviate that. Let's see what let's hear from Mr. Montana. And you're also part of this meeting. I'm trying to understand, what is it that you are trying to achieve?
Exactly what I've stated in my statement.
Yes, he says he sought to ensure that Mr. Gupta got clarification or answers to his questions so that before he can decide whether to go to court or not, as I understand the explanation.
Yes, I hear that, Mr. Chairman. I want to understand. But then you were also part of that meeting.
Yes, I'm the one who initiated the meeting.
Yes.
So I was part of the meeting.
And couldn't you have allowed Mr. Montana to meet with Mr. Gupta alone?
That would have been possible, but I initiated the meeting. At that stage, Mr. Montana, if I introduce him to somebody, at least I should be there.
Yes.
Why am I introducing him? What's the issue?
All right.
So I had to explain to him.
Okay, thank you. And then, so the end result was that he understood?
Yeah, the end result was that he understood, was not happy, but that was it.
Yes. And then when...
I'm sorry.
Yes.
If I understood your evidence correctly, prior to that, you had had some interactions with either Mr. Tony Gupta or the Gupta family before before he phoned you.
That is correct, Judge.
And was it one or two interactions that you had had with him, or you had come to know him quite well before that?
As I explained in part of the statement that I'd read, I'd met him in different contexts. I made mention that the first time I met him was when I was appointed, after I'd been appointed as the Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises.
Yes.
And the Department of Public Enterprises had a TNA SABC event breakfast meeting that which had been arranged before my arrival at the department. So when this breakfast meeting was to take place, I met Mr. Tony Gupta and his brother Atul, who was involved in the media aspect of their business. Because at that particular breakfast meeting, the minister would have to answer questions or make a statement, and
yes,
the deputy minister would also have a role to play in that.
Okay.
So that was but one other occasion that I said that I'd met the Gupta brothers, and then I made mention to this particular time I'd met them, and then after that was at the airport.
Yes. And then let's talk then about...
Maybe another question would be your relationship with the Gupta brothers at that time. Was it simply a professional relationship in your official capacity as either previously deputy minister or now as minister, or did it go beyond that?
It was simply a professional relationship.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Martins, then you testified that after then you had this meeting and you had dismissed the function that is going to be held on the tarmac. When again then did you get this call from the ATNS official?
If memory serves me well, I received the call from the ATNS official after the plane had landed at Waterkloof Air Base, and after the wedding had been in process, or the wedding proceedings had been in process for a day or two. It was during the time, they were supposed to be in the country for 4 days or 5 days, but during that period was, I think it was the second day, I speak under correction, when I received a call from an official from ATNS one morning to say that here is this plane that was in the country which did not have the correct papers. The operator's permit, it's referred to somewhere in the statement. And then they informed me that if a plane is in the country without the requisite papers, there's a fine to be imposed. And I said, go ahead, impose the fine and ensure that the plane is not in the country without the correct papers.
Yes. Would this have been the first incident that a plane without papers had been reported to you?
That was the first and only time that I recall a plane being reported in that nature.
And then you deal with that aspect at page 7 of your statement. Paragraph 17.
That's correct.
Yes. So what this plane didn't have, according to that statement, is that the foreign operator's permit.
That's correct.
Yes. And then, do you know how this 80,000 was calculated, or was that not something that you got involved in?
That's not within the remit of my responsibility, the calculations of the fees.
Yes.
But what I do recall was that the individual concerned who called me said that there are 1 or 2 fees, but the highest fee was this 82.
Yes.
And I said, proceed with that.
Thank you. Then, this report then is made to you. Were you expected to do anything about it?
Which report?
The report about this plane that had landed without a foreign operator's permit.
The official that called me was informing me, giving me information that this is what has happened, this plane is in the country without the requisite papers.
Yes.
And I said, what's your duty in regard to that? What are you supposed to do? And he explained that a fine has to be imposed, and I said that continue, carry out what the law and regulations require.
Yes.
So that's the function that was my responsibility.
Your responsibility, all right. And then, did you receive an invitation to the wedding?
I did receive an invitation to the wedding.
Yes, and you deal with that at page, let me just take to that. If I may take you back to page 5, paragraph 11.
Yes.
Yes, and could you just tell the chairperson what you say in that paragraph?
I was invited to the Gupta wedding. The invitation was delivered to my office. The invitation was in the name of the bride and bridegroom. I did not attend the wedding.
Yes. Could you tell the chairperson the reasons why you did not attend?
There are 2 reasons.
Yeah.
Over that time of the wedding, I had a personal family commitment to attend to. And the other reason that was given, a committee of security cluster ministers had met and advised against ministers attending that wedding.
Yes. And then the commission had referred you to the JCPS cluster. That would have related to that committee of ministers, is that correct? Yes. And you were asked to comment specifically to some parts of that report. You recall that? And you deal with your comments in paragraph 19 of your statement.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, just The JCPS report is contained in Ms. Sindane's statement. I beg-
Yes, but if the witness is able to just tell us.
Oh, just
he
tell us,
doesn't have to read it, he doesn't have to refer
Okay.
to it. If he knows exactly
Yes, he's
what
commented.
he wants to say, he can say it, but
Alright.
if he wants to refresh his memory, then he can look at it.
Okay,
But
thank
he
you.
might be able to just tell us without us having to go to the report.
All right, thank you. You comment on the report in paragraph 19. Could you just tell the chairperson briefly what you say in those paragraphs?
In February 2013, Mr. Tony Gupta approached the Airport Company of South Africa to inquire about the use of OR Tambo International Airport for the arrival of at least five.
This
We
is-
mustn't go
yes.
back.
This is the
Aren't we going
evidence.
back?
We're going back. This is the evidence that you've already given.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
directed to something new.
Yes.
Direct him to something new.
Could you just go up to,
And even if it's really important,
no, Mr. Chairman,
I know
just,
that his evidence is supposed to be very limited.
no, definitely. Could you just go to paragraph 19.4, page 8 of your statement?
Yes.
You make reference to a follow-up meeting. Were you part of that follow-up meeting?
No, I was not part of the follow-up meeting. As I stated earlier,
Yes.
the correspondence between Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Maseko continued, where Mr. Maseko advised him of seeking the services of Lanseria Airport and the other one, Pilansberg, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. And when this ministers cluster had the committee, did you submit a statement to that committee?
Yes.
Yes.
It's referred to in the report that
In the
they've
report
compiled.
itself? And everything that is recorded there as having, you have submitted a statement, and whatever it is that you said in that statement is correct, is the reference to yourself in that report?
I would assume it's correct. I've not seen the statement I've submitted since
That
the
time?
year in question, but
Yes.
I'm sure that it would correspond to what my evidence has been here today.
Yes, thank you. Maybe because I do have that statement, unfortunately it was received late yesterday from the state security. Mr. Chairman, if I may just, unfortunately the bundles on this aspect are not ready. If you would just allow me, before I hand up your revised bundle.
Yes, do you know whether the statement says anything
Yes, I
different
just
from
want
what
to-
he has said?
I just want to read it to him. It's a very short statement.
Yes, but I want to find out whether you know whether it says anything different from what he has already told me.
No, it doesn't say anything different, but I think it's important for the witness to see it and then say that this is indeed what he had
How
submitted.
long is it?
No, it's 2 pages. Thank you. May I then, unfortunately, this is your bundle, Mr. Chairman, just to have the witness have a look at it. Thank you.
Is it a statement that he signed?
Yes, it's his statement. He submitted it to the committee.
Yeah, well, he can always submit a supplementary affidavit and confirm whether it is correct.
Yes. What is your comment?
I know you have not been given a lot of time to have a look. Are you satisfied you have been able to read it properly to be able to say if it's correct?
Thank you, Judge. I did read the statement.
Yes.
It's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
It's
you.
what I've articulated even here today.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then in response to paragraph 2.1.15 of the report, the question posed was whether you received any instructions from the President to assist the Gupta family as alleged in that paragraph. And could you just tell the Chairperson your response to that?
I did not receive any instructions from former President Zuma to assist in that regard.
Yes. And did you at any stage give any instruction to anyone to allow the landing of that aircraft at Waterkloof?
I did not give anyone instructions to allow the landing because, as I said in my statement, the Ministry of Transport or the Minister of Transport does not have authority over Waterkloof Air Base. It falls under the Department of Defense and Military Veterans.
Is there anything else you wish to tell the Chairperson other than what you've testified to this morning?
There's nothing else that I wish to share now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is the evidence for this, from this statement.
Mr. Martins, we do seek to establish from current and past members of the executive whether they had any interactions with the Gupta family in the past, and you have told me some of the interactions that you have had. But I take this opportunity to ask whether you ever visited their residence at Saxon World.
Judge, I did.
Yes.
And
Maybe you can tell me when it was, if you are able to remember, how many times, if you are able to remember, and what the occasion was and what was discussed, if you feel that it is something you can share.
the occasion that I went to the residence there, the Gupta family had organized a Indian food fair. I went there. It was in the morning. I can't recall the exact date.
Yes, yes.
And they were displaying. They had chefs or cooks that
Yes.
showed how to prepare rotis,
Yes.
how to prepare other Indian foods. And I was there. It had been a public invitation to members of the public, some
Yes.
members of the public, I assume,
Yes.
and also ministers.
Yes.
So I attended that
Yes.
at one of the residences at Saxonwold.
Yes. Was it on one occasion that you visited their residence, or was it more than once?
I think I've been there more than once.
Yes, two, 3 times, maybe much more than that.
No, perhaps about 2 times.
About 2 times, yes. And the other time, what was the occasion, if you are able to remember?
The other time was either shortly after my appointment as the Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises,
Yes.
or after my appointment as the Minister of Transport.
Yes.
There was a TNA breakfast show that I had to address. And the format I'd been told that was used in the past was that a minister would come and address, speak about the department, and thereafter questions would be asked. And my view was that instead of just the minister addressing the occasion, it would be advisable if the Director General, Deputy Minister, and other key people be able to answer questions from the floor, from the public. So in that interaction, the person I spoke to there was Mr. Atul Gupta, the middle brother, who was involved with the arrangement of the SABC and their link to the media. So that was the context.
But that was not at the residence, was it?
That meeting took place at the residence.
At the residence. So that was the second meeting.
Yes.
But that one was business. You were there for business in the sense of those breakfast shows.
Yes.
Yes. The first one was not business.
The first one was not business.
Yes.
The second one was occasioned by they'd called the office, there'd been interaction, this was coming up.
Yes.
And then said that, can you pass there, we discuss this.
Yes.
So I went there.
Yes. And to their offices, Sahara offices, did you ever go there?
No, I've never been
You
to
did
Sahara
go there.
offices.
Yes. Did they ever ask you for did they ever ask you to facilitate any business for them in your capacity as either Minister of Transport or Deputy Minister in Public Works?
No, not.
They did not.
They did not.
Yes.
The engagement was what I referred to.
What you have
Yes.
said. Okay, no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. There's just one document I forgot to refer the witness to, which appears in bundle FF8, which I've placed next to the witness at page 38.
Yes.
Just one question for Mr. Martins to identify that document because it relates to the foreign permit that he made reference to. Page 38. Okay,
Yes.
do you identify it's a document from the Department of Transport? Yes.
Yes, I can see.
Yes, could you just explain what that document is to the chairperson?
The heading of the document reads Department of Transport International Air Services Act of 1993, application for a foreign operator's permit, application for an amendment to a foreign operator's permit. And then the rest of the print is illegible there.
Yes. But is this the document that would relate to the foreign permits that you spoke about earlier? Whether one has it or not?
This particular document I've not seen before. So I'm not sure which is what document the relevant agency issues.
Yeah, he might not know
I
because
don't know
those were
this format.
operational
Yes.
issues.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you
That's
very
all.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martins, for coming to give evidence. We appreciate it. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Judge.
Thank you. You are excused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next witness, I'm not sure whether we'll adjourn for the short break before I call the next witness.
Is there much to happen when he goes there?
Yes, because we need to place his bundle there.
Is it not the same? Is it just one bundle? Maybe we can avoid adjourning because we'll adjourn at 15:15 anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you just put his bundle there? It will be in that box. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May the witness be sworn in?
Yes, please administer the oath of affirmation. Which exhibit are we going to use?
I beg your pardon. It will be exhibit FF9, Mr. Chairman.
9.
9, yes, FF9.
Please state your full names for the record.
Hendrik Jacobus Marie.
Do you have any objection with taking the prescribed oath?
I do not.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Murray, you have placed a document placed before you, exhibit FF9. Do you have it?
I do.
Yes. Could you please look at page, I'll give you the page now.
Sorry, Ms. Norman. The file containing a statement from the Air Traffic and Navigation Services. It will be marked Exhibit FF9.
As Chairperson pleases. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Murray, if you look at page 1, numbered on top of that page on your right-hand corner.
Yes.
Yes, and I just want you to identify that statement. There is a signature also appearing at page 2929.
I identify the statement and it is my signature.
Yes, and are the contents true and correct?
Correct, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Could you just give the chairperson briefly your qualifications?
Chairperson, I started my career in the South African Air Force in 1980 as an air traffic controller. Then joined the Department of Transport in 1984, also as an air traffic controller, but just in the civilian domain instead of the military. I was an air traffic controller.
I'm sorry, Mr. Murray. It looks like, you did put your names on record before taking the oath, but I was looking for the full name in the statement. It doesn't look like it appears at the beginning, and it's just the initial and the surname. That doesn't look like his full names can be found anywhere in the document. Am I missing something, Ms. Norman?
No, you're not, Mr. Chairman. But
Yes, his full names should have been given.
Yes.
What does H stand for?
Hendrik.
Sorry?
Hendrik.
Please spell that for me.
H-E-N-D-R.
H-E-N.
Yes, sir. D-R-I-K.
D-R-I-K.
I-K.
Hendrik.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I performed as an air traffic controller in the South African Air Force and in the civilian domain. Eventually became an instructor and manager of training. Then moved into the safety management systems of aviation, or air traffic control rather, and into the planning. In my current role, I'm the executive in charge of delivering air traffic services for the civilian control airspace in South Africa.
Yes. Where are you currently employed, and what is your position?
My title is the Chief of Air Traffic Services, employed at the ATNS head office in Bruma.
Where is that?
In Bruma.
In Bruma. Yes. What is the responsibility of ATNS?
ATNS is responsible to acquire and deploy infrastructure and deliver the air traffic services to ensure the safety of aviation in the controlled airspace within the state of South Africa and in the oceanic airspace delegated to South Africa.
Yes. And how does that happen? Does it happen when a plane lands or when a plane takes off? At what point do you get involved?
We're involved in the entire process. So we will receive the flight plan for the aircraft, be that a departure out of one of our domestic airports or landing at one of our airports or even flying between two airports within South Africa. We receive the flight plan. We're involved from planning for that flight in terms of the slot coordination, when that aircraft can depart and when not, so we minimize the delays on the flight and of course optimize fuel burn. We'll take care of the departure clearance for the traffic, the startup taxi, the takeoff, the climb out, the cruise, and on the other end, again, the descent, the approach and the landing into the destination airport.
So you
So,
monitor.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
So are you responsible for making sure that a flight doesn't take off if it's not safe to do so, doesn't land if it is not safe to do so, among other things?
Chairman, yes, that's correct. We are focused primarily on safety and
Yes.
secondly on efficiency. So if it's not safe, the aircraft will not depart or land. For example, if there's an obstruction on the runway.
If there is,
An obstruction on the runway or
Okay,
traffic in the
yes.
way of that traffic
Yes.
departing or landing.
yes. And you basically give the final word. If you think it's not safe, that's final. Nobody's going to interfere with that from outside your section.
I need to
Or
explain
you
a little.
advise.
May I explain a bit
Yes,
on that?
please do.
Yes, we will make the decision in terms of air traffic safety. So if there's something on the runway, we will say, no, you are not cleared for takeoff, or you are not cleared to land, and the airplane will execute a missed approach. However, the ultimate responsibility for safety of an aircraft and its occupants still lies with the pilot in command.
Yes, but so you give you make your decision, and but there is understanding between yourselves and the pilot that the pilot makes the final decision.
Correct.
And if he makes a decision that's contrary to your decision, that's his judgment call.
Yes, Judge.
But that would not happen lightly, I would imagine.
No, that's not normal circumstance.
That's not normal circumstances. Yes. Okay. Also, with regard to departure, same thing. You make your decision. Is it safe for the flight to take off?
That's correct.
And then the pilot decides whether to go with your decision or whether not to. But if he doesn't go according to your decision, that's his judgment call or her judgment call.
They will go with our decision. The decision, for example, if it is to take off, where the pilot will exercise his judgment call will be when there's a problem with the aircraft and they have to reject the takeoff.
Yes, okay.
So that's where
okay.
they will exercise that judgment.
And you because your decision whether an aircraft can take off or not, or should not take off or not, is based on matters outside of the aircraft and not inside.
Correct.
If the pilot becomes aware that there is a problem with the engine, that's something you don't get yourself involved in. He must know, or she must know about that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You also say when you deal with ATNS that it's a commercialized entity operating user pays. What is that concept?
This will be a bit of a lengthy explanation, unfortunately.
Okay,
Oh,
if it's
maybe-
going to be lengthy, let's
Yes.
take the tea adjournment.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we'll resume at 11:30.
Thank you,
We
Mr.
adjourn.
We consult our plans with industry, and we then submit this application for a permission to levy a tariff. Post-consultation, and the regulating committee will then, in consultation with the minister, publish the permission for ATNS to levy a tariff for our services. So the users then pay a tariff, and it's based on the weight of the aircraft and the distance that aircraft flies in the airspace under our jurisdiction. So a smaller aircraft in short distance will have a small tariff. A big aircraft flying a long distance in our airspace will pay a larger tariff. And then we levy the tariff to afford what we install in terms of infrastructure and people we employ and deploy to deliver our services.
Yes. Thank you. And then you, in paragraph 3.2.1, you say that in order for ATNS to operate properly, it has to employ technical experts for its effective operations.
Correct.
Yes.
We employ air traffic controllers to deliver the service. It's a specialized job. We train those people to be able to deliver the service, and first and foremost, again, to deliver on the safety objectives. It's all about safety. Those people we train internally, firstly academic training, and then on-the-job training to be able to do that. And they're also subject to recurrency training throughout the year, and of course license renewals as for pilots.
Yes.
We also employ aeronautical information management personnel, which is referred to in the next paragraph. Shall I continue with that?
Yes.
And relevant to this is that those will be the people that will process the flight plans we receive. So they'll receive the flight plan, check it, and process it into the South African system, and then ensure that that information is captured in our air traffic management automation systems.
Who would prepare flight plan? Is it the pilot or is it somebody else?
Judge, a few options. If you and I were going to fly to Cape Town now and you are the pilot in command, you can submit the flight plan a few ways, one via fax. The other one, you can do it on an internet interface, or you can phone the briefing office and read the flight plan, and we will then copy it down and submit it into the system. If it's an airline operation, it'll mostly be the operations center submitting the flight plan on behalf of the pilot in command.
Okay. And the flight plan basically proposes that at such and such a time, a certain aircraft will be, or proposes to take off, and from this airport to that destination, and then you have a look and you are able to, you investigate whether everything will be in order at that time for it to take off, from where it proposes to take off to where it will go, and whether within South Africa everything will be safe in the air, and also whether if the destination is within South Africa, whether it will be safe for it to land where it proposes to land at a particular time. Is that what your role is in regard to a flight plan?
To some extent, we receive the flight plan, and we will then do capacity planning for the traffic. We know we are quite busy morning, midday, and late afternoon, early evenings, because it's mostly when domestic flights operate to move business people across the country. So we'll do the capacity planning based on the flight plan, and we will include information when you file the flight plan, for example, to say the runway at your destination is obstructed at the moment, or it's got a problem with it, or certain of the navigation aids en route or approach aids at the destination airport are not functioning, and you'll know that information. The decision about safety is more tactical. We will make the decision almost on the fly to decide the runway is clear, that aircraft can go now. If the aircraft requires to climb or descend, the controller will make that decision based on available information at the time, and it's a rather tactical operation more than a strategic way of doing things.
Yes.
I hope it answers your question.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you did, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Could you explain to the chairperson what is meant by saying an aircraft has entered South African airspace? And you've given us some videos. We could just show the chairperson, if you want us, you'll indicate which video you want played, just to show, because the issue is there has to be some permits before anyone flies into our airspace, and where is that? Could you just deal with those aspects?
Maybe before he does so, let me go back to the answer that you gave to my question. You said one of the things you have to see to when you have received a flight plan is capacity. Can you tell me more in terms of capacity for where to do what? Does that relate to, are there enough pilots to go into that aircraft? Are there enough hostesses to go into that? Or is it about the ground staff? And where does the capacity that falls under your responsibility, where is it located?
Judge, it's really about the capacity of the airspace and where we can get traffic to fly or not. We have declared capacities for each one of the airports where we deliver a service. So, for example, if you're going to fly into OR Tambo, and we have declared a capacity of 50 air traffic movements for the hour, will your movement exceed the 50, or will it be within our capacity limits?
Yes. Oh, that's aircrafts in the space during a particular hour.
Correct.
Yes, you don't want to have more than X number of aircrafts at the same time, more or less in the same space.
That is correct, because it influences safety for one. And secondly, if you exceed your capacity, some traffic will have to hold.
Yes.
And that will imply that we're going to have aircraft burning off unnecessarily burning off fuel, and of course then emissions into the atmosphere. The fuel burn is the thing that costs the airline the money. So we try and balance the capacity so we don't sit with aircraft in holding stacks or burning of fuel unnecessarily on extended routings because we're struggling to fit you into our capacity limitations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And would that happen sometimes when one flies, you would hear that we've been told, the pilot would say, we have just been told to circle around because there is no space to park, something like that. Would that relate to that as well?
It does. It considers the airport capacity, for example, parking, as you've said, madam. But it also considers the runway capacity and how many aircraft we can get through the runway in an hour or a specific period of time. And also the spacing we use between aircraft when we sequence them into the runways and out of the runways on departure. Because we need to mix the amount of landings and the amount of departures and find that balance.
Yes.
So if we have less departures for this hour, we can handle more arrivals and vice versa.
Thank you. Can we go back to the earlier question then? You have an aircraft flying from Indira Gandhi Airport from India coming into the South African airspace. How do you deal with that situation? What is it that you need other than the flight plan that you've just mentioned?
As you've correctly said, we will base our service on the flight plan. So the flight plan will be the early warning we receive that the aircraft is on its way to South Africa, whichever airport. And then the airspace sector before us will coordinate that flight with us. So the flight will have a flight plan, for example, from Indira Gandhi. We will then receive a notification from that airport, or that air traffic control center rather, that the traffic has departed. And we call that a departure message. So it says, he told you he's coming, he's now airborne, and we know the aircraft is flying. That's for search and rescue purposes. So when that aircraft then transits across the Indian Ocean, it'll eventually, in this example, enter the Mozambican airspace to the east of us. And the Mozambique Air Navigation Service provider will contact our control center, or we call it the Johannesburg Control Center, based at OR Tambo. We'll contact that air traffic control center and pass the traffic information about when that aircraft will enter our airspace, at which point, and at which flight level or altitude. And that we call coordination. So they will coordinate the flight with us, read us the information, and we'll read that back to them to confirm that we've correctly received it. It's all about check and balance. And then when the aircraft arrives at the airspace boundary, there will be a transfer of control between the Mozambique air traffic controller and the Johannesburg air traffic controller. And that traffic will then call us up on the frequency, and we will issue what we call an inbound clearance.
Yes. Now, before you deal with that, could you just show us on the videos as to where that entry is made? We're dealing with this one aircraft from Indira Gandhi into South Africa.
Yes, I think you can just show video one, and if it
Yes.
can be on still, then it's
Thank
far
you.
easier to explain.
We don't have to play the whole video, but just for you
No.
to demonstrate. Yes, thank you.
Is it possible to enlarge that a little bit?
Can you enlarge it? Okay. Can you? Okay. No, they say it's not possible because it's a video, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So the pale gray that you see on the screen is South African airspace. The darker gray shade is the airspace to the east and northeast. Right off to the east, there where the cursor is now, is Mozambican airspace, and to the north will be Zimbabwe above that little white line with a little jagged point in it. The airspace at the bottom of that, a circle with two straight lines and a smaller circle, that's the Hoedspruit military airspace.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
he's not following with the,
No.
they're not following with the,
Yes.
with
I
the
wonder if
cursor. Can you not
I wonder if
can you
could
not
the
give it
witness
to
be
him
moved?
to
Yes.
move it?
Maybe.
Can you, if you can give it to him, or you can't take it to him?
Or
Well,
it's
if you
connected
move the
here.
cursor, I'll speak to where the
Oh,
cursor is.
okay, just listen to him when he tells you where to move the cursor to.
Okay. So
Yes.
I see where that,
Okay. Sorry.
the little pointer is.
Yes.
So below, if you move the pointer to the south, down,
Yeah, yes.
slightly left, that airspace is the Hoedspruit military airspace. Controlled airspace.
What space is that?
Air Force Base Hoedspruit.
Okay.
Okay.
And you see the lines running through that airspace in a darker shade, very dark gray. No, below that, they run diagonally across the screen.
I see about 3 lines, is that what you're talking
Correct,
about?
there are 3 lines.
3 lines, yeah.
They almost join up in the east and then split into a fork running down towards the southwest.
Yes, what is that?
Those are what we call RNAV routes. It is area
Is that-
navigation routes.
Is that the road for the aircrafts?
Correct, sir. So that is the track that the aircraft will fly depending upon where they are bound.
Yes.
So if you then go to,
So just for my own understanding, so an aircraft can't just fly anywhere. It's got to follow certain, must be on the road, in quotes. It must be on certain roads. It can't just fly anywhere just because it can fly.
correct, because that's also how we do the capacity planning and
Yes.
moving the traffic without having too many of them conflict with each other, being head-on, for example, climbing and descending.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So then if you move the cursor to the almost middle there, where you were,
Wait. Okay.
more to
Down.
the left and down,
Down.
that is the piece of airspace surrounding Polokwane. That is the Polokwane airport with its airspace, around it controlled airspace.
Now,
Provides the service there. And if you go slightly above that and up, that is the airspace at Mikado, at the Air Force Base.
Sorry.
Have you told us about 3 airspaces now?
3 different pieces of airspace?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
The first one was right on the south. That one, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, when you say airspace in that context, what's the function of that airspace? What purpose does it serve?
Okay. So each piece of airspace is designed around the airport and the type of traffic it services. That is a terminal airspace I've just referred to, the one at Hoedspruit. So that will manage the traffic in and out of Air Force Base Hoedspruit. And that'll be military, and I finally regained some control. I'll take that, Judge.
Okay, so the purpose of the airspace that we are talking about, well, let me first check. It would be around an airport?
Yes.
Airspace?
Correct.
It will always be around an airport, not just out of anywhere.
It can be both.
It can be both.
And sorry, perhaps I should try and explain more to
Yes,
clarify.
yes. I just want to understand the importance of those three airspaces, or airspaces in general.
They are there to protect really the military traffic around Hoedspruit and the civilian traffic. The one down here where the pointer is at the moment.
Yes.
So there'll be a piece of airspace on the ground, touching the ground,
Yes.
up to a limit above the ground,
Yeah.
and with defined horizontal limits. And that's there so that we can protect, or the Air Force in this case, the runway and the traffic flying around Hoedspruit Air Force Base.
So it's meant to make sure that, there aren't too many aircrafts coming within the space or coming too close to the airport when it might not be right to do so for safety reasons.
That is true. And also for the air traffic controller to have an area of jurisdiction within which they can issue the instructions to ensure the safety of the traffic.
Okay. Beyond that airspace, then the air controller doesn't issue any instructions.
No.
But when the aircraft enters that space, that airspace, then they can get instructions from the air controller.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And the instructions from the air controller could include the instruction that you may land or don't land, or not really.
In terms of the runway being clear to land and safe, it does include.
Okay, thank
But
you.
in terms of an approval to land at an airport,
Yeah,
that's not the air traffic controller's
yeah,
domain.
that's general.
Correct.
Yeah, and then the air controller relates to the specific and the actual time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the terminal airspace around Air Force Base Hoedspruit, in which they will maneuver the traffic in and out of the airport, routing to other airports or in and out of here because there will be military training. The same purpose will be served by this airspace up here to the north around Makadu. And this airspace here is at Polokwane, as I've indicated, and that is really for civilian traffic, where the other two are predominantly for military traffic with some civilian traffic included.
Okay.
The large grey airspace running from down
Well,
that line that I'm
bef-
following with the cursor,
Oh, before that, you said that these airspaces can be both around an airport and not around an airport. Now I can understand when they are around an airport. When they are not around an airport, under what circumstances would you have them away from an airport?
I'm going to ask you to visualize a set of tins,
Yes.
cake tins. So the lowest airspace or the control zone will be touching on the surface, and that'll be a smaller tin. The terminal airspace above that will be a slightly larger tin on top of that, and then another airspace on top. So I've spoken about control zone and terminal airspace, and then we get what we call control areas, and those are large pieces of airspace, and that will take care of upper flight levels. And those are not necessarily in the vicinity of an airport. So we will have a control area which will cover the entire airspace over Gauteng, for example, and the Free State, joining onto a control area for Cape Town. And there are no airports below that, other than some smaller private airports, for example,
Okay.
or airfields.
Okay, okay.
You also have control zones sitting over large pieces of airspace where we control air traffic in the last part of the climb, the cruise, and the first part of the descent,
Yeah,
and it's not in the vicinity of an
Yeah.
airport.
okay, thank you.
And where would the Waterkloof area be there?
It's off to the west, and we can see that on the next,
On the next video?
yes, and I think we can go to number 2. Do you need your mouse?
No. I'm sorry, before we move maybe to that, are you finished on this slide?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you were still demonstrating the large part before we go to that one?
The large grey
yes,
part,
yes.
by and large, is,
Sorry. Okay.
we don't have to see the video, I think we
Yes.
can remember,
Okay.
is what is called military training area. It's a restricted airspace, published predominantly for the purposes of military training flights. However, since I don't use that airspace continuously, we have an arrangement with the South African Air Force called flexible use of airspace, where when they are not occupying that airspace, we can issue routes for civilian traffic through that airspace. And it just optimizes the routing, and again, of course, results in some fuel and time savings for the operators.
Yes, thank you. So the second one? Want us to move to the second one?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. That's the second video. Is that the one? Maybe play the video and see.
Oh, you can close that video. Is this the second video? So what we will see, and unfortunately I've got a bit of a distance problem here. The black target sitting over there
Yeah.
would have entered the South African airspace here at a position called IPSEC. And that was the position coordinated by the Mozambican Air Navigation Service provider. And the traffic is then entering the airspace here. And I cannot see that, but confirm that says Juliet Alpha India 9900. That is Jet Airways 9900, the flight inbound from Indira Gandhi to Waterkloof. At the moment, it is showing the information, as you can see there.
Hang on one second.
Sorry.
I'm wondering whether if for the duration of the time that he was going to be showing us that, whether if he said closer, there would be any problem with the transcript.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, because is for the witness, I think they will have a difficulty, but Reverend Stemela has just suggested that maybe if the witness could use the one, but then the
I will do
DCJ
that.
will not be able to see. But if you point there, it will point on this one.
I can.
Yes.
Forget this one too.
Me too.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. But then we will be able to see, is that?
Yeah, those who
Thank
can
you.
look at
Well,
that
if
one
you
can look
this
at
one.
that one. You can
Yes.
look at this one.
Yes, thank
So
you.
that's then where the flight entered the South African airspace. It would have obtained an inbound clearance from the Johannesburg controller.
Oh, I'm sorry. When you are using that one, the mouse can't go there, or it can show us on that side.
Flight over there
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yes.
is then that specific flight inbound from Indira Gandhi to Waterkloof, as per the flight plan.
Yes. Let me just understand again. Just remind me, the darker portion outside that light grayish, large light grayish area, yeah, where the mouse is. What is that? What is that?
That's the Mozambique airspace.
Oh, that's Mozambican airspace.
Correct.
Oh, okay. And then where you have the border, kind of borderline, and you then have a lighter gray area, yeah, that's the beginning of South African airspace.
Correct, Judge.
Okay, and then the three airspaces we're talking about are, in effect, airspaces within South African's larger airspace.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And then that line, if you go up, yes, that on the right, yes, that line, what is that? Is that a route, as I said, a route for an aircraft? Is that an air route or what?
No, Chairman. That is the airspace boundary between Mozambique and Zimbabwe.
Oh, okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay,
Now
thank you.
I understand, okay.
Thank you. You were pointing out the water kloof. Where is that?
Waterkloof is off to this side. We will need to, this is where the aircraft initially comes in.
Yes.
And when we go to the third recording, I'll be able to show you the Johannesburg and Waterkloof airspace.
All right.
So we
Thank
can
you.
progress to that
To the
one.
next one. Okay. Thank you.
Is that frozen? Good.
Thank you.
So here we will see, I'm going to try and move my microphone a little bit. Do you see the little white flashes on the screen? That is just how the air traffic controller is interacting with the electronic data on the aircraft as they're issuing instructions and changing flight levels and headings, for example. And I think we're best off if you would like to pause this, please.
Okay.
Thank you. So you'll see traffic flying in and out of our Tambo over here. The northbound runway is in use, runway 03, traffic departing of the western runway and landing on the eastern runway, runway 03 right. This is the control zone, the lines here, around around our Tambo. This little piece of airspace here is Air Force Base Swartkop airspace, and this here is the Waterkloof control zone with the entire airspace where the cursor is going around now, there being the Waterkloof terminal controlled airspace. And this race course here is Von der Boom.
Yes. Who controls the Waterkloof airspace?
The Waterkloof airspace is assigned to the South African Air Force, but by arrangement of the flexible use of airspace, we control it most of the time from our Tambo under the Johannesburg Approach Control Service to optimize the routes in and out of our Tambo. Because as you can see, those airspaces and the airports are quite close together, and our Tambo being the busier, we can benefit from using the military airspace. And then should there be military requirement, we'll give it back to the military and they will return it to us when they are completed with that, and we can optimize the civilian traffic through there.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to show the chairperson on that chart?
No, it's not necessary, just that when you look at the information here from an interest point of view, you'll see that that's the aircraft call sign. So that'll be coupled to the flight plan, the base we have on the flight plan, and the radar data which we receive from the aircraft transponder. And then below that we have the flight level of the aircraft, the speed, and the destination or the next navigation point it is proceeding to. And that information will be displayed for any aircraft that we have a flight plan and it has a transponder on.
Yes. Thank you.
Just perhaps before you go,
Yes.
the Waterkloof runway here is runway 01 and 19. They only have the one runway that they use for operations.
Thank you. Then let's deal with the flight plans, and then you must just demonstrate then to the chairperson what information is required for a flight plan, and you've put up the 3 flight plans that this particular aircraft, which we're dealing with from Indira Gandhi, what plans were put up and why, according to your understanding. I know we've jumped a bit, but we'll go back to the other information that you've put up in your statement. But I think because it's neatly linked to what you've just demonstrated, if you could go to page 18, 18.
I have arrived there.
Yes.
So what is in the statement is really a screenshot of the flight plan we would have received from or for flight Julie Alpha India 9900, the Jet Airways charter. And I'll quickly speak you through what is on the screenshot. It is again, of course, all in code because there's a limited amount of characters we can transmit in this message type. So you need to maximize each character that you use. So at the top you'll see 2 letters, FF, and in text followed by FAJAZQ and FAJAYF, etc. That'll be where the flight plan was addressed to, and the FF is the priority assigned to the flight plan. Since there will be 10 hours elapsed between the flight taking off and landing at its destination, there's no need to expedite the transmission of this. So it would not have been a high priority, such as an emergency message, for example. Then it'll say the letters FPL, which is the flight plan. Next to that is the aircraft call sign. And while I'm speaking about call sign, when I get to the next fields at the bottom, there'll be the aircraft's registration. So the aircraft will be registered against a certain set of numbers or letters, depending on the country of origin. And then there will be a call sign, which is what the aircraft will call itself when it communicates to air traffic control. So the call sign here is Jet Airways 9900, yet the registration, when you go down to the bottom, will just be 5 letters, which is Victor Tango Juliet Whiskey Golf. Next to
So the call sign will be like how they will identify themselves to you when they are approaching or something like that.
That's correct.
Yes, okay.
So for example, South African Airways will use the call sign Springbok.
Yes.
British Airways will use Speedbird followed by a set of numbers.
Yes, yes. And the choice of the call sign, has it got anything to do with safety and intelligence, or it's just their choice, whatever word you decide to use?
The name is picked by the airline and is then registered with the International Civil Aviation Organization as a 3-letter designator and what call sign accompanies that code.
Okay.
Numbers will be assigned in some cases depending upon safety, because if you have 123 and 231 and 312, that can lead to some confusion, especially on the radio.
Yes.
So we may assign a letter to that, for example, 132 Alpha, just to ensure that we have safety and we don't have communications where you have the wrong pilot responding and reacting to an instruction.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Then next to the call sign, you have 2 letters, Y and N. The Y indicates the flight rules the aircraft will fly. We have 3 different types, in fact 4. Normally flights will fly instrument flight rules, flights of this duration, and they will fly then by reference to the instrumentation in the flight deck, coupled to the signals they receive from ground installations or from satellites or GPS, for example. The other one is V, for visual flight rules. That's where the pilot will navigate by means of visual reference to identifiable things on the ground, such as roads, towns, rivers, or dams, for example. The Y here indicates that the flight was first going to fly instrument flight rules and then changed to visual flight rules, which is quite different to what we are used to.
Okay. Does this mean that as long as it can see, then it doesn't need to use the instrument? How do you distinguish between the visual and the instrument operation?
In this case, normally, it will fly instrument flight rules until the aircraft reaches a point on its route beyond which there are no more navigation aids available. So, and if you'll allow me to carry on a bit, I'll try and explain it when we get to the route of the aircraft. I think it'll be more clear.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
We then have the N, which stands for charter. It's non-scheduled operation. And if it was a scheduled operation, it would have been S for schedule. So it indicates what type of flight rules and what type of flight they're going to fly. Below that is the type of aircraft. This is an Airbus 330-200. It is heavy wake category, so it'll have a heavy wake turbulence influence on traffic behind it. The letters to the right, and I'm not going to go through all of them, really explains or indicates what type of navigation communication equipment this aircraft has on board. And each letter will represent a specific type of equipment. Below that then, the letters VIDP is the aerodrome of departure, which is Indira Gandhi in New Delhi. And the aircraft would have taken off at 1800, which is in fact 8 o'clock at night in South Africa. We work on UTC throughout aviation, so we work on a standard time, and it is 2 hours, South Africa time -2. So in this case, you will see that it indicates 1800, and it's in 8 o'clock in South Africa. In fact, UTC, you can also equate to GMT. Below that then is the aircraft speed and its flight level and the route it's going to fly. The 5-letter indicators, for example, behind the DCT, which says direct. So from takeoff, this aircraft is going to go direct to a position called Rebon, and then it gives the route as we continue. I said I would clarify the Y letter we had in the flight rules. I don't think the whole route is relevant, and I do not intend to bore you with that, Judge. When we get to the Hotel Bravo Victor, the HBV, on the second line of the route, the third last set of characters, that was a navigation aid installed just to the north of the Hartbeespoort Dam. And we now see that this flight is going to go to that navigation aid, and from there you go visual flight rules to Air Force Base Waterkloof, the FAWK below. So they were going to navigate with instruments until they got to the Hotel Bravo Victor navigation aid, and en route visual flight rules to Waterkloof. They would have flown for 10 hours and 8 minutes. The alternate to the destination is King Shaka, FALE. So if they had to divert, they would have gone to Durban. Below that, we have additional information regarding navigation, which was not able to fit into the top field due to the limitation of characters. And then we have communication and additional information such as the aircraft's registration. And in the EET, about 2/3 in the row with a slash, then VABF and a time and FSSS. Those are the information regions that aircraft would have crossed. So different countries' airspaces. So it would have left Indian airspace, then entered into the Seychelles airspace, and finally into the Mozambican airspace, and then into the Johannesburg airspace.
Okay.
And that contains all the additional information for those boundaries, and it then says who the operator is and what the en route alternate airports will be. So if the aircraft had a problem en route, it would have diverted either to the Seychelles, to Harare, or it would have turned back into India.
And those alternatives must also be included in that on that flight plan?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and this would simply tell you about, it tells us about the route itself, but does it tell you who the owner of the aircraft is and the capacity of the passengers on board?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, the second last line on the right-hand side, it says Operator Jet Airways. So it tells us who the operator is. Additional information such as persons on board, it will never indicate the names to us. I don't think we have the capacity to process 400 names on each flight plan. It will, however, tell us how many people are on board, flight or crew members and passengers, and that's for search and rescue purposes. It's not transmitted in the flight plan like this. We'll receive it in the departure message because that's when they have actually counted people on board, and they can give us exact fuel endurance for the flight. So that information will come in the departure message I referred to earlier.
Okay, thank you. And then the same explanation, if you turn over the page, could you just highlight then the difference between the first flight plan that you find at 9.1 and the second one, 9.2, and then we'll deal with the third one?
The 9.2 differs really because the call sign is different, it's a different flight. So you'll remember it was 9900.
Yes.
This one is 9002. The equipment on board is the same aircraft. The registration remains the same, except this flight is departing from Waterkloof and its destination is OR Tambo. So it's departing Waterkloof at 0900 in the morning, which is 11 o'clock, and it'll fly for 12 minutes to land at OR Tambo, and again the alternate airport is King Shaka.
Yes. And where are the times? What day, the date and the time?
This flight plan does not indicate a date of departure. So when you go the third row down on that flight plan,
Yes.
it says 020731. So that'll be the 2nd of May, because the aircraft landed on the 30th of April. So that will be the day that is filed. If there's no alternate time of departure or date of departure indicated below, it'll be specific to that day.
All right. Okay. And then what is then the difference between the flight plan in 9.2 and 9.3?
9.2, as I said, is inbound from Waterkloof to Tambo. 9.3 is a flight plan for the difference, again, in the call sign. It's Jet Airways 9901. And interestingly here, the type of flight indicates a schedule. It may be a small error. It should, in fact, have indicated N for a non-schedule or a charter flight. The same aircraft with the same equipage. The big difference here is that the aircraft is scheduled to go out of Tambo to Indira Gandhi in India. And then, of course, the route will be substantially different, and the flight duration is 9 hours 37. Interesting when you compare this to the flight plan in 9.1 is the shorter time it takes to go eastbound than what it takes to come westbound because of the prevailing westerly winds. So it'll be much quicker to go to Delhi than what it is to come from Delhi to Johannesburg.
Thank you. If you may then just go back, sorry, on the flight plans, that was the last one. Could we then just go back on the requirements, just briefly? You've already highlighted them as you were explaining at page 13 as to what is it that's supposed to go into a flight plan. You've explained the technical part to it, and if you could just explain it in layman's terms.
So the two real requirements,
Yes.
excuse me, it is which flights need to file a flight plan. So if you're going to fly in scheduled or non-scheduled operations where the flight operates for reward, there must be a flight plan filed. If you are going to cross an international boundary, you must file a flight plan. Or if your flight will enter controlled airspace, except when it crosses an air route at right angles, you must file a flight plan. So there are these requirements for when flights are mandated to file a flight plan, and they have to file that flight plan.
So if you're flying from Johannesburg to Cape Town?
You will have to file a flight plan. Because you're going to fly in the Johannesburg controlled airspace, and you're going to operate in the Cape Town controlled airspace. So you'll be mandated to file a flight plan. There are more. When you, for example, the flight requires search and rescue, you'll have to file a flight plan. Or when you fly on instrument flight rules, you are mandated to file a flight plan.
Okay, thank you. So if you then controlling an aircraft from ATNS towers, and an aircraft has filed a flight plan, is there anything else that you need to require from that aircraft before it departs or it lands?
No, there's no requirement. The flight plan really says this is what I intend to do as the pilot in command. And we will then, as an air-navigation service provider, base our service on the flight plan and based on the route of aircraft or the pilot in command is requested to fly.
Thank you.
Would you normally react to a flight plan so that the person who has sent the flight plan knows whether you are okay with it or whether there are challenges, or is the position that if there is no problem, you don't have to react or respond, but if there is a problem, then you have to be in touch with them?
You are correct, sir. If we do not respond or query, there's no problem with the flight plan. Yet again, you can also file a flight plan today for an operation tomorrow, and because of weather conditions or wind, decide that you want to change the flight level, for example. And that request can also be made verbally before you start your aircraft to depart. So the first contact you will have with air traffic control, you'll say, and request flight level, for example. So those small changes are tactically handled in the system.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. And then at page, I beg your pardon, at page 14, You've already given the chairperson the indication about what is to be contained on the plan, and could you just deal with those that you have not dealt with in technical terms?
I think it's probably easier if we start on page 13, just to make sure we don't miss anything.
Yes, you may start there.
Thank you.
So if you're going to go down the page, and it must be contained, that comes in a later section. You can file your flight plan with an air traffic services unit or a briefing office, and I think we've covered that in previous information. So flight plans shall be filed in respect of A, all flights to be conducted in controlled or advisory airspace. Remember I mentioned that if you fly in controlled airspace, you need to file a flight plan, except this shall not apply if A, it is a local flight. For example, a local flight will be a training flight, which will take off from airports such as Vonnerbloem, Rand Airport, or Lanseria, and go do a training flight and return to that airport. That'll be a local flight. A flight crossing an airway or an advisory route at right angles is not required to file a flight plan. And a VFR flight entering or departing from an aerodrome traffic zone or control zone, from or to an unmanned aerodrome where no other controlled airspace will be entered. And then for an international flight, you must file a flight plan. And then there are flights in the Class 1 or Class 2 license issued, and that really relates to the operation of charters. Any flight within or into designated areas or along designated routes, when so required by the ATS authority to facilitate the provision of flight information, alerting and search and rescue services, and any flight within or into designated areas or along designated routes, when so required by the appropriate authority to facilitate coordination with appropriate military units or air traffic service units. That abbreviation ATSUs, air traffic service units. And it also applies to the adjacent states to avoid possible need for interception for the purpose of identification. And then the rest of the text is in the contents of the flight plan.
Yes. And then let's talk about then this particular aircraft. And you've already explained the differences between the three flight plans. From the moment then it left Indira Gandhi, could you just tell the chairperson its route from the moment it left it would have been on the 29th, because it landed at Waterkloof on the 30th.
So the route will really be out of Indian airspace out into the Indian Ocean. It'll route between the Seychelles and Madagascar on a track to about Bora. It'll enter the South African airspace around there. Position EPSEC is very close to Bora, so we can just get the geography. From there, it'll then get to inbound clearance into Johannesburg, issued by the air traffic controller. The aircraft will then start requesting descent based on how they had planned the trajectory and the flight. We will then provide them with descent to initial levels, and those descents will always be limited to what is safe. In a specific case, the aircraft was cleared to different levels at different times because there was traffic below that, other aircraft flying. Then once the descent is down to about flight level 160 and passing around about flight level 200, the traffic will be handed over to Johannesburg approach radar, and that function will then position the traffic into its destination. So in this case, approach radar would vector the traffic onto Waterkloof Air Force Base, because the navigation aids at Waterkloof at the time were not available.
So does that mean that you could not coordinate this flight with Waterkloof?
No, it does not mean that.
Pardon?
they could not receive the navigation aid on the ground at Waterkloof, but we specifically coordinated the flight with the air traffic control at Waterkloof, and that is on the recordings.
Yes. And
So we would, sorry ma'am, let me just continue a small explanation.
Yes,
We
yes.
would call Waterkloof when the aircraft commences the descent, so we know how to route the traffic. And then that will also mean how we plan to descend the traffic and position them into the whole larger Johannesburg terminal airspace, considering that they need to position in that smaller piece of airspace for Waterkloof.
Okay. All right. And then you deal with the climb-out and the cruise of the aircraft at pages 16. And of course, you've already dealt with the descent. Is there anything that you would like to highlight? I take it that when it's cruising now, that's when Autopilot is in charge. Is that correct? Or not necessarily?
Mostly, remember the aircraft can also climb and descend with Autopilot, and I'm not a pilot, but they use the Autopilot in many cases quite soon after takeoff and until close to the runway, and in many cases even during the landing, depending on how the aircraft and the crew are trained and certified.
Okay.
But in the cruises, predominantly when the aircraft is level, it may change levels during the night, especially if you fly on the Europe tracks. You'll know that as the aircraft burns fuel, it becomes lighter, and it can then climb higher to optimize fuel burn on the aircraft. So it's less fuel burn the higher they go.
Yes. And then when it then landed at Waterkloof, did your responsibility end at that point, or do you continue monitoring it up to a certain point, and if so, what is that point?
The responsibility for ATNS would continue until that aircraft got Waterkloof in sight. Remember I mentioned that the navigation aids were not functioning, so we would have continued to position that aircraft by means of radar until the pilot in command got the runway in sight. Once they got the runway in sight, we would then hand them over to Waterkloof, and the landing and everything thereafter would be under the jurisdiction of the Waterkloof air traffic controller.
Okay. And
I'm sorry.
sorry, sir.
In terms of playing your role, you or your team, would they physically see the aircraft on the screen from a certain point after it has entered South African airspace, or they would just have an idea where exactly it is but not see the actual aircraft on a screen or something?
Judge, the radar picture actually gives us an indication exactly where the aircraft is. And it's based on a very technical solution, but we have more than one sensor that will detect the aircraft at the same time. So we also have redundancy in the system. So where the aircraft is displayed is actually calibrated and computed in the system. So it's exactly where the aircraft is, with some very small margin of error which is allowed. And you will see a little block, if you recall what you saw on the screen earlier, a little block with a call sign, the speed and the flight level, and some additional information. And that is exactly where the aircraft is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. And then you dealt, maybe we could just go to where then just you deal with the monitoring of that particular aircraft and your interpretation of its route. You deal with that at page 20, or am I going, is there any other aspect you want to highlight at pages 17 and 18, maybe before we go to 20?
No, I think we've covered everything up to page 19.
Thank you. And then, could you then just deal with what you deal with at page 20?
Page 20 of the statement and onwards is an attempt to translate the code of the flight plan into layman's terms. So what you will see is a whole list of capital letters starting with F, triple S, Z, Q, Z, X, ending right down to F, A, J, A, F, D, P, A, and right above that, F, A, W, K, Z, T, Z, X. Now, each of those are associated to an airport or an air traffic control service or an air traffic service. And the lettering behind that is what kind of service that is. So Seychelles ZQ, or sorry, FSSZQZX is the Seychelles. ZQZX is the flight information region, and it indicates that it's an instrument flight rules aircraft. So those are all the addresses which will be included in the flight plan, so it reaches all the relevant airports and air traffic service providers which will deal with the flight for its duration.
Yes. And you deal with that. There was an alternate airport as well, which was King Shaka Airport.
Yes.
In the event that they couldn't land at Waterkloof.
You will see the destination at the bottom of the first paragraph is Waterkloof, FAWKZ2ZX, which is the control tower. And then the alternative is King Shaka, and that is Z2ZX, which is the control tower there. And it is then addressed to other addresses. FAJA, for example, is Johannesburg, the general area. And the FDPA is where we will process the flight plan information.
In the last paragraph, in paragraph 9.4, the last three sentences there, you make mention that the addresses provided here are different from the address provided in the screenshot of the flight plan. The additional addresses were added by the Johannesburg briefing unit when processing the flight plan. Could you just explain that?
Yes, if you cast your mind back to the screenshot, there were only 3 addresses in that.
Yes.
The operator in India will not necessarily know who to send all this information to in South Africa, and vice versa. We wouldn't know exactly who to send it to in India. So what happens is they will dispatch the flight plan to the FIR, or the region, Johannesburg, and the flight plan processing and the information unit. And the information unit, or the briefing office as we call it, will then look at this flight plan, see where it was sent to and where not, and add the additional addresses.
Who constitutes the briefing unit?
That is the information management officers we spoke about earlier when I spoke about specialist resources, do you recall?
Yeah.
So they will man that unit, and they will forward this flight plan to where it belongs.
So they will be officials within ATNS?
Correct.
And then the next page.
The next page is really starts on...
It just deals with codes, am I right?
Correct, and that is really the Callsign and the flight rules and the type of flight, which I think we have addressed, madam.
Yes. At what point then would you, that is as ATNS, get to know that a particular flight didn't have a foreign overflight permit?
The foreign operator permit,
Yes.
I think we've heard in earlier evidence, we will know about this when the aircraft is landed and we discover that it did not have one. ATNS mandate is to provide safe and efficient services and not to check for the security component of the flight. That resides with the security agencies and those who issue the foreign operator permit. The responsibility of ATNS is to ensure that we receive the flight plan and process the aircraft in accordance with the flight plan received and the services requested therein. So we will base on the routing, the flight levels and the destination, and we will provide that service.
And then when the foreign operator's permit is not there, what are the steps that you would take as ATNS?
If we notice that there's no foreign operator permit, we will inform the Department of Transport if we do notice, but our task is not to monitor for foreign operator permits, to issue them, or to police who has or who has not. We focus merely on the delivery of safety and efficiency as per the mandate of the organization.
Who would impose the fine?
Madam, I do not know.
And in all the years that you've worked with ATNS, have you ever reached a point where you find that the flight doesn't have a foreign operator's permit, where you have had to contact the minister, and where you've had to direct that a fine be imposed?
No. In my career with Ionis, I have become aware of flights that did not have foreign operator permits. The reporting thereof is sent to the Civil Aviation Authority and the Department of Transport. Imposition of fine, Ionis does not impose any fines to anybody. We're here to provide a service and to levy a tariff for that service. There's no recollection of any fines or of reporting to the Minister.
Okay. And then, sorry, you deal with the flight again at pages 21 and 22. Are there areas that you wish to highlight there?
Ma'am, I think we've explained the routing.
Yes.
And those 5 letter points are really in Indian airspace, in Seychelles Bora and Mozambican airspace. And those 5 letter points are based on coordinates, and they are probably out over the high seas. So that's about the only point of interest. You will notice that the flight initially cruised at flight level 340. It then changes to flight level 380 after position BOMOB.
Where are you now? Sorry, Mr.
On
Wright.
page 21, midway down the page,
Yes.
the underlined text. And that is again, as they would have burnt off fuel and become lighter, they would have been able to climb higher. And then the plane was again to climb higher to flight level 400, so they can again optimize their burn. And then from Uniform Golf 465, it indicates where the traffic starts its plan to descend into South African airspace.
Okay. And then at paragraph 10.1, that's a sequence of events. Is there anything you want to highlight?
Ma'am, no, I think that just places on record, Judge, the whole sequence of events we had since we received flight plan coordination from Mozambique, how we worked the traffic into South African airspace, started the descent, positioned the traffic for Waterkloof until we finally transferred control of the traffic to Waterkloof when we got the runway in sight.
Okay, thank you. If you go to page 26, the first sentence there, also dealing with the sequence, it says Waterkloof Tower request start and after departure clearance for that. So who would have within the Waterkloof Tower, what is the position or the level of the official who would have requested that?
That would have been an air traffic controller, military air traffic controller, employed by the South African Air Force. The rank I wouldn't know, it will be an officer.
Yes.
And that will be, air traffic controller will then come in contact with our approach service at Johannesburg and just request to start the traffic.
Yes.
So if I can just expand a bit,
Yes.
the request for start is that once we say the aircraft can start, we know we can accept the aircraft into our airspace. If we would rather issue a short delay for the start, it is easier for the aircraft to be delayed with engines off than to burn fuel and stand and wait at the runway end for departure. So that's really the purpose for start. Where can we fit the traffic in?
All right. And then, is there anything you want to highlight there, remaining paragraph 10.2?
No, this is really just a flight from Waterkloof to our Tambo. The sequence of events that happened from requesting the start and the clearance, which was subsequently issued. The aircraft then got airborne. It was placed under radar control, and it was positioned by radar until it landed, positioned onto runway 21 for our Tambo, the taxi clearance, and then perhaps importantly on page 27 at the time 13:10 and 44 seconds,
Yes.
where we received an instruction from the CAA to tell the aircraft that no one should disembark until they've got approval from the Civil Aviation Authority.
You got that instruction from?
The Civil Aviation Authority.
That they mustn't embark, no one must
No one
embark?
should disembark until the CAA has authorized that.
Yes. Do you know how long then that aircraft was kept there without passengers disembarking?
No, I do not. It reached its parking bay at 12 minutes past 3 and 45 seconds. A parking bay on the northern side of our Tambo. How long the people were on the aircraft, I do not know. It's not within our domain.
Yes.
What would be the normal reason for Civil Aviation Authority to say, let the passengers not disembark until we have given approval? What would be the normal reasons?
Judges may require some speculation, and please
Or
want
is
us
it
to
something
understand
that's
that.
not within your, with
It
this?
may be reasons for no foreign operator permit. There may be a problem with the aircraft itself,
Yes,
or it may be grounded for some reason,
okay,
or it may even be that there could be a communicable disease reported on the aircraft.
Okay.
There's so many different
okay,
potential options.
okay.
Thank you. Could I just refer you to, I just want to show you some documents. You'll indicate to the chairperson whether those do come to your attention as ATNS. You have a bundle, Exhibit FF8. It's next to you there. If I could just refer the witness to that bundle. If you could please turn to page 28.
I have page 28.
Yes. Would this type of document land at your desk as ATNS? It's a request for diplomatic overflight and landing clearance.
No, it
You-
will not.
It will not. You will
That
not see
must
it.
probably go to International Relations Department.
Yes, yes. No, I just wanted to know whether they do submit any of these documents to them. And then, if you go to, would it be the same as the one appearing in page 31? Because it's addressed to Senior Controller Air Command Unit. That would go to Waterkloof.
Yes, that will be addressed to a military official. It's not civilian.
Not come to you. Thank you. Thank you. And then let's go back to your statement. You were at page 27. And you've highlighted the instruction from SAA. And is there anything else you would like to highlight?
No, ma'am, that information is all covered.
Okay,
I've
all
explained
covered.
what happened there.
Yes. And then in conclusion, what do you say in conclusion?
ATNS, as an air navigation service provider, provides air traffic services to any flights based on flight plans received. Once a flight plan is received, we process and ensure safe operations of the aircraft within the airspace under our jurisdiction by preventing collisions between aircraft and on the maneuvering area between aircraft and obstructions, and expediting and maintaining an orderly flow of traffic. That is really the mandate of ATNS, and that's what we've executed in this instance.
Yes, thank you. And then when a plane, you've monitored that aircraft, would you be charging for that service?
Yes, we would charge for that service.
And do you know whether in this instance you were paid or you charged Jet Airways and you were paid?
I have confirmed with our finance department that we did issue an invoice and that we were paid.
Yes. And you do not know how much that invoice was?
I think the invoice was for about 10,200 Rand. I can't remember the exact numbers.
Yes. Do you charge per hour or per minute?
Now remember, we charge per weight, per distance flown. So this would have been for the distance flown by the aircraft and the maximum takeoff weight of the specific Airbus 330.
You don't take into account the landing weight because
No,
by that
it's-
time fuel has burned and the aircraft is lighter.
No, because then you'll have a continuous discrepancy in how you bill. So the government gazette published will refer to maximum takeoff weight.
Yes.
So we'll treat everybody the same.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. You are excused. Thank you for having come to give evidence before the commission. Thank you very
Judge.
much.
It was a privilege.
Thank you. You are excused.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are the witnesses that were scheduled for today. But we could deal with the records because I wanted to place on record.
How come
item-
you had such short witnesses?
Yes,
We still have quite some time.
yes, yes. Are we going to just check who else you can bring forward? during the lunch break.
Sorry?
We will check who we could bring forward during the lunch break. Yes.
Is there another one that you had planned for later in the day?
No, we did not plan any other witness. We planned these two witnesses for the day.
Oh, but they were
but-
very short. How did that happen?
Well, we didn't know that
Mr. Martins was very limited.
Yes.
Obviously, he didn't even need to take an hour.
Yes.
And this witness also just did less than about 1.5 hours?
Yes, yes.
And it could have been less than an hour.
Well, maybe we
So they were very short.
We misjudged them, and also because these witnesses, the availability of other witnesses was also a difficulty. For instance, the witness that we called tomorrow was supposed to testify today, and that's one of the longest witnesses, but then it transpired that she cannot come at all. Then we had to reschedule for the third.
But why was I not told about these challenges?
The challenge of the witnesses being short today, I did not anticipate that. I saw the statements, they were short, but sometimes witnesses with short statements, they go overboard and they take longer. But I could, after lunch, place on record what we had received from the public protector, because that is something that we want to place on record. And also deal with the application, the subpoena, the documents that were submitted on subpoena. But that will not take long.
What is there for the rest of the week?
We've got one witness which is a long witness for tomorrow. We've got two witnesses on the 4th. We've got two witnesses on tomorrow's what, the 3rd? Yeah, 3rd. 3rd is one witness, which is a long witness. As the 4th, we've got two witnesses. And the 5th, we've got two witnesses, and maybe the 3rd witness on the 4th. And then on the 5th, we've got two witnesses as well.
Yeah, no, I think I should have been told if there was going to be this challenge, because we need to try and use all the time available to us. Okay, you will talk to me and let me see the statements for the witnesses for the rest of the week.
Yes.
So that we can try and make sure that we don't run into this problem, if at all possible, for the rest of the week.
Yes, thank you.
You said you might get another witness, but you are not sure for later.
We could, maybe if we could adjourn for 5 minutes, I could just establish and then let you know, Mr. Chairman. But then-
How long would that witness be?
It's difficult to tell, Mr. Chairman, because the statements, they are short, but witnesses can be referred to various other documents, and then it takes longer. But I could, if you give us 5 minutes, we could establish that and then let you know before 1 o'clock.
Yeah, no, it's not going to help if you are not already sure. Okay, I think we'll have to adjourn until tomorrow. You will talk to me about the rest of the week from tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you.
That's all we have for the day. We will adjourn until tomorrow morning at 10. We adjourn.
Thank you.